Hey all, today in The Last Words we're going to be talking about Dracula 2000. And you might be asking yourself why, and that's a fair question. And it's mostly because I randomly watched it the other night and want to talk about it. But it occur to me that it's been 20 years now since Dracula 2000, which is kind of interesting, with a name like that. It obviously thought itself very modern at the time. So to see something like that kind of age further and further into the distance, 20 years seems as good of a time as any to take a look back on it. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, about how it kind of fits in now, viewing it through our modern lens when it was so clearly a product of its time. But before we get into that, some house cleaning notes. Of course, it was released in the year 2000, so it was a contemporary release to its title. It was directed by Patrick Lussier, who went on to direct the Dracula sequels, which went straight to DVD, and are honestly even worse than Dracula 2000, sorry Patrick, but also directed the My Bloody Valentine 3D film. He's done a few other things over the years, but those are probably his biggest horror claim to fame, at least. It is presented by Wes Craven. Wes Craven's name is plastered all over this. Wes Craven presents Dracula 2000. From what I've been able to find, Wes Craven had almost nothing to do with it, and it is literally just his name, just his brand. Maybe he was involved, producing it to some degree, but he was not very involved with the actual production of the movie in any way. So it has a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes, which seems about right. It is bad. It's not very fun to watch even now. It has a few redeeming qualities, but overall, 17%, that seems pretty fair. It made $47 million at the box office, which for a horror movie is a ton, but it had a budget of $54 million. So it still managed to lose money, even making $47 million. That's pretty abysmal. And it kind of just goes to show a difference in approach to horror movies through the years. This is probably back when horror movies were still getting more of those kinds of budgets. And of course, having Wes Craven attached to it and the Dracula brand, I'm sure that put it over the top. But spending $47 million on a horror movie nowadays is almost unheard of, and then for that movie to not even make its budget back is, wow, that's really bad. It's amazing that they even made directed video sequels. Sorry again, Patrick. So we're going to look at it today in the sense that now, 20 years later, in the year 2020 as of this recording, it's basically an unintended period piece. It is very much a time capsule of the year 2000, or at least a certain aspect of it, or the way people saw it in a certain light. Basically, what you need to know about this movie, this sums it up, is that it is a Dracula movie that has Linkin Park and Marilyn Manson on the soundtrack. So if you can start to wrap your head around that, you're going to be able to picture this movie pretty well. It's almost exactly what you would expect from there. It's, Dracula walks out of a Hot Topic kind of thing. So that's a lot of why it seems kind of so weird and charming now, if you have any nostalgia for that age. There's a lot other things like that. Like there's a Virgin store, the music store, prominently featured over and over again in the movie. There must have been some kind of product placement, because the Virgin logo is just all over this movie, and the characters work in the Virgin store, and there's headsets where you come in and listen to CDs, and it's part of the thing that really kind of dates it to this time period. So that's interesting. And then another thing about it is that a lot of it takes place in New Orleans. And so it was New Orleans before Hurricane Katrina, of course. So in that sense, it's kind of an interesting retrospective on the city at that time. A lot of it deals with Mardi Gras. And it's very obviously a 2000 Mardi Gras, a pre-social media smartphone era Mardi Gras. And that's a lot of what happens. The best parts of the movie is basically Dracula does Mardi Gras. It's this young, suave Dracula walking around Mardi Gras and soaking in the sights and seeing all the debauchery, of our modern age, and he loves it, of course. Being the king of debauchery from his own age, I guess he feels a little more at home. But it's all very silly, and I think hopefully it was intended to be, to a degree. Dracula was already such a known entity at that point that you probably can't avoid some of that inherent cheesiness, and I would like to think that the filmmakers were just trying to embrace that. But when he walks around and is kind of like leering at all of this stuff and smiling, it's something else. It's one of the most fun parts of the movie. A lot of the movie is not fun. I won't get into a lot of it. The opening is so slow. It's one of the worst openings I think I can really place off the top of my head. It starts as this kind of like weird, heist movie, spy thriller thing. Just takes a while to get going and to get to the Dracula parts that we're actually there to see. Once that starts, It's okay enough. There are some cool Dracula scenes, but there's nothing revolutionary, and a lot of it is not done as well as other times we have seen it in films. So, in a way, in this kind of silly way, going back to the idea of it being this unintended period piece, it feels a bit like a successor to the spirit of some of the Hammer horror Dracula films. And I mean specifically the later ones. Of course, the first few, at least, the horror of Dracula and stuff, are tremendous, and I love those movies. But a lot of people kind of forget about how zany and just off the rails that series ends up going with things like Dracula 1972 AD and things like that. And this has that same kind of just like, what were they thinking? Like, I guess they're trying to, do something new with the formula and make it applicable to modern audiences, but it's just very strange, especially in retrospect, when it just feels such a product of its time. It was very much part of the action horror zeitgeist that was happening at that time in the year 2000. You had films like Blade and the Mummy movies with Brendan Fraser. You had animes and mangas like Vampire Hunter D getting a lot of attention in America. So there was kind of just this big culmination of these factors at this time. And, I feel like it really led to films like the Underworld films. And I think Van Helsing by, his name escapes me right now, but the same guy who did The Mummy, that kind of is maybe what killed this momentum in films. I like Van Helsing fine, but I think after that is when people were like, maybe this isn't working, because we started to see less of them after that, and we get into other eras of horror. But that action movie horror thing was very big at this time, and that's definitely an element of this movie. And I kind of wonder if that started from Buffy, especially, the TV show Buffy. If at this point, a few years after Buffy had already been on the air, people are trying to kind of capitalize on that feeling and that spirit. I can see that. It's obviously not done as well as Buffy was, but I wonder if there is some element of that in Dracula 2000, and if that's why it is the movie that it is. So again, it's not a good movie. I can't necessarily recommend that you go watch it. It's definitely more of a thing if you want to, put on with some friends and laugh at and have a good time with. It was rough for me even to just sit down and be like, all right, I'm going to watch this again. Maybe there was something I didn't get in it. It had been a while since I had seen it, and no, it's just pretty bad. But there are things to enjoy and laugh at, kind of, and that's not the worst thing. At least there is something to be taken from it. It has this interesting 2000 era take on the Dracula story, and you're probably not going to get anything that authentic, at least from that time period again. So. That's it. Hopefully you liked this. If you did, please give the video a like and subscribe to Something Spooky. Check back for more next time. Thank you.